Close your eyes and picture the ancient world. Not the marble ruins we see today, but living cities. Pyramids reaching into the sun, smoke curling from temples, priests chanting words older than memory. For thousands of years, ritual was the bridge between humans and gods. But faith was never gentle. In the shadows of temples and under the watchful eyes of idols, rituals turned dark. Some demanded blood, others bones, still others feasts of chaos. They were not merely traditions. They were bargains, gifts offered in terror and awe, hoping to secure life, victory, or salvation. Tonight, we descend into that world. From the Aztec pyramids soaked in blood, to the icy fjords where Norse warriors carved lungs into the sky, to the silent towers where corpses were left for the birds, we uncovered 10 creepy rituals from ancient civilizations. Few images of the ancient world are as chilling or as misunderstood as the human sacrifices of the Aztecs. The Aztec Empire, at its height in the 15th century, was a world built on conquest. Its capital, Tenochtitlan, shone with white stone temples and canals. But beneath the glory lay a belief that the sun itself needed human blood to rise. Atop the great Templo Mayor, high priests painted in black and red awaited the captives. The victims were often prisoners of war, marched up the steep stone steps to the summit. Drums pounded, conch shells blared, and incense smoke curled into the sky. Before the gathered crowd, the victim was laid upon a stone altar. The ritual knife, a blade of obsidian sharp enough to split hair, flashed in the sunday. In one swift motion, the priest plunged it into the chest, tore out the still-beating heart, and lifted it toward the heavens. Blood spilled down the steps, staining the temple red. To modern eyes, this seems monstrous, yet to the Aztecs, it was sacred necessity. They believed the gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world, and humanity owed a blood debt in return. Without sacrifice, the sun might not rise, the rains might not fall, and the universe itself could collapse into darkness. Spanish chroniclers later exaggerated numbers, claiming tens of thousands were killed in a single festival. While historians debate the scale, there is no doubt that the Aztecs practiced human sacrifice regularly, and that their pyramids became theaters of blood and faith. To stand in that crowd must have been terrifying. To hear the drums, to feel the earth shake with the chants, to smell the iron tang of blood on the wind. It was more than ritual. It was the universe held together by death. If the Aztecs sought to keep the sun alive with blood, the Egyptians sought to keep the soul alive with preservation. To them, death was not the end. It was a passage, a journey into the afterlife. And for that journey, the body had to remain intact. Thus was born one of the most chilling and most meticulous rituals of the ancient world, mummification. Picture an embalming chamber by the Nile, its air thick with incense and resin. The body of the deceased lies on a stone slab, stripped bare, waiting for the sacred transformation. Priests wearing jackal-headed masks of Anubis chant prayers, their hands guided by centuries of ritual. The first act is gruesome, the removal of the brain. Through the nostrils, a hooked tool is inserted, twisting, breaking the fragile bone, pulling out the soft tissue bit by bit. This delicate but brutal act left the skull empty, ready to be filled with resin. The brain, the Egyptians believed, was unimportant to the soul, but the heart they kept, for the heart was the seat of memory, identity, and moral judgment, weighed against the feather of Ma'at in the afterlife. The body is then opened with a sharp obsidian blade. The internal organs are carefully removed, dried, and placed in canopic jars, each protected by a deity. The falcon-headed Kibe-Senuef, the baboon-headed Hapi, the jackal-headed Duamutef, and the human-headed Imseti. Each jar guarded not just flesh, but the essence of life itself. Next came the drying. The body was packed in natron, natural salt crystals from the desert, for 40 days, until every drop of moisture was gone. The skin shrank, the flesh hardened, leaving behind something not quite human, not quite divine. Then the priests anointed the body with oils and perfumes, stuffing the chest with linen and resin, reshaping the face, restoring dignity to the corpse. Inch by inch, they wound linen strips around the body, layer after layer, chanting spells from the Book of the Dead. Amulets, scarabs, ankhs, eyes of Horus were slipped between wrappings, each a magical key for the perilous journey ahead. Finally, the body was placed in its coffin, often multiple coffins nested like shells and sealed within a tomb. Food, gold, and treasures were placed nearby, for the dead would need them beyond. For pharaohs, this meant entire pyramids, mountains of stone, built to house a single preserved body, a single soul. The ritual was not mere superstition, it was cosmic engineering. By preserving the body, the Egyptians believed they preserved the Ka, the life force, and the Ba, the personality, allowing the soul to reunite in the field of reeds, their vision of paradise. To witness mummification was to watch humans defy decay, to cheat time itself. But to stand in that embalming room smelling resin and death, hearing chants echo off stone walls, was also to feel the uncanny. A ritual where the line between reverence and horror blurred, where the dead seemed never entirely gone. High in the mountains of Greece, where the air was thin and the rocks shimmered in the sunlight, there was a place the ancients believed was the very center of the world. They called it Delphi, the navel of the earth, where the god Apollo spoke to mortals through the mouth of a woman. To enter the sanctuary of Apollo was to step into a realm of trembling awe. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean, kings, warriors, merchants, even philosophers, each seeking answers to questions of life and death. Would their empire rise or fall? Should they go to war? Could they trust an ally or betray him? All waited for the voice of the oracle. At the heart of the temple was the Adyton, the inner chamber. There, upon a tripod over a fissure in the earth, sat the Pythia, the priestess chosen to channel Apollo's will. Dressed in flowing robes, her hair bound with laurel leaves, she was no longer just a woman. She was a vessel, a medium between God and man. The ritual began with purification. A goat was sprinkled with cold water. If it shivered, the sign was favorable, and the ceremony could proceed. Then the Pythia herself would bathe in the sacred spring, drink from the waters of Cassotis, and chew laurel leaves to prepare her mind. Inside the dim chamber, thick with incense, the fissure in the rock exhaled strange vapors. Ancient writers claimed it was here, inhaling the fumes, that the Pythia fell into trance. Her body shook, her voice trembled, and then, in a voice not entirely her own, she spoke. What she uttered was often incoherent ravings, fragments, screams. Yet nearby priests listened carefully, shaping her words into verses, messages from Apollo himself. And kings obeyed. Battles were fought, alliances made, cities founded on the muttered words of a trembling woman in a darkened chamber. Was it divine possession or something else? Modern scientists suggest gases from the earth, perhaps ethylene, may have induced hallucinations. Whatever the truth, to those who knelt before her, the Pythia's words were unquestionable fate. Consider the chilling power of this ritual. Empires bent to the will of a woman in trance. Lives and nations decided by syllables whispered through smoke. To witness it was to believe the boundary between human and divine could dissolve, that Apollo himself could speak through mortal flesh, Yet the oracle was never simply a voice of truth. Her prophecies were famously ambiguous. When Croesus, king of Lydia, asked if he should go to war with Persia, the oracle replied, "If you do, a great empire will fall." He marched, only to discover the empire that fell was his own. And so Delphi became a place not only of faith, but of dread. For here, under the shadow of Apollo's temple, the future itself was unveiled, but never clearly. Always wrapped in mystery, always tinged with menace. Across the sea from Rome, on the northern coast of Africa, lay Carthage, a city of traders, warriors, and seafarers. Its harbors bustled with ships, its markets glittered with wealth. But behind the splendor of its empire lurked one of the darkest rituals in the ancient world, the sacrifice of children to the god Baal. The heart of this ritual was the Tophet, a sacred open-air sanctuary filled with stone stelae carved with images of outstretched hands or blazing fires. Here, under the gaze of priests and citizens, parents brought their infants, their most precious possessions, to offer them to the divine. Why? Because Carthaginians believed the gods demanded it. In times of crisis, drought, famine, or war, the life of a child was the highest offering, a desperate plea for protection or mercy. The god Baal Hammon and the goddess Tanit were thought to hold the fate of the city in their hands, and only the purest sacrifice could sway their judgment. Ancient writers, especially the Roman sworn enemies of Carthage, described the ritual with horror. They wrote of bronze statues of Baal, arms outstretched, heated from below by roaring flames. Infants were placed upon the arms, rolling into the fire as drums thundered and flutes shrieked, drowning out the cries. The smoke rose to the heavens, a grim message of devotion. Were these accounts exaggerated, propaganda to blacken Carthage's name? Perhaps. But archaeology has unearthed thousands of urns in Carthaginian Tophets, each containing the charred remains of children and young animals. Some were newborns, others toddlers, their tiny bones mingled with ash. Inscriptions on the stelae speak of vows fulfilled. To Baal, for he heard my voice. Imagine the scene, torchlight flickering on stone walls, the smell of burning fat thick in the night air, the wails of parents mixing with the chants of priests. To outsiders, it was barbarity. To the Carthaginians, it was piety, the ultimate act of faith. A sacrifice so great it might bend the will of the gods themselves. The Romans would one day destroy Carthage, salting its earth so nothing would grow. Yet the memory of its rituals lived on, whispered as a warning of what devotion could demand. Even now, the Tophet speaks. The silent urns, the scorched bones, the stelae, carved with hands lifted to heaven, they tell of a world where the cost of survival was measured in children's lives, where the line between worship and horror blurred in the firelight. Deep in the jungles of Central America, the Maya built cities of stone that seemed to rise from the earth like mountains. Their temples aligned with the stars, their calendars tracked the cosmos, and their myths spoke of a shadowy underworld called Xibalba, the place of fear. For the Maya, death was not an ending, but a passage through Xibalba. And just as no traveler would dare walk alone through a dark wilderness, no soul should attempt the journey unaided. That is why the Maya buried their dead with guides. Sometimes it was food, jade, or precious ornaments, and sometimes it was a dog. Archaeologists have uncovered graves across the Maya world where dogs were carefully interred beside humans. In some tombs, the animal's bones lie curled at the feet of its master. In others, collars of jade and obsidian mark them as sacred companions. These were not random burials. They were rituals, acts of devotion, and acts of necessity. The Maya believed dogs were psychopomps, guides of the soul, Just as they could lead humans through the dense jungle in life, they could lead the spirit through the treacherous roads of the afterlife. Their mythic color was yellow, the hue of the maize that sustained the people. A yellow dog, it was said, could find the hidden river and ferry the soul across to safety. Imagine the scene: a funeral in a Maya village. The body of the departed wrapped in cloth, painted with red cinnabar. Beside them, a dog is sacrificed, its throat cut, its body placed tenderly alongside the master. Incense of copal resin fills the air, drifting upward like prayers. Priests chant the names of gods, Hun Kame and Vukub Kame, lords of Xibalba, asking them to show mercy, to let the soul pass unharmed. The dog, loyal in life, becomes loyal in death. It runs ahead in the underworld, its nose sniffing out hidden paths, its bark scaring away demons. In this way, human and animal walk together beyond the grave. To modernize, it may seem cruel to take the life of a companion, but to the Maya, it was an act of love, a gift to the dead, ensuring they would not wander lost in eternal darkness. The bones remain as testimony. In sacred caves and beneath collapsed pyramids, archaeologists still find them, human and dog, side by side for over 1,000 years. Silent proof of a belief that stretched beyond death into the deepest shadows of the spirit world. For the Maya, the dog was not just a pet. It was a key, a guide, a faithful companion who could walk the soul through Xibalba, across rivers of blood and mountains of knives, to reach the paradise of maize fields on the other side. Rome was a city of laws, legions, and order. Its empire stretched across continents, built on discipline and hierarchy. Masters ruled slaves, men ruled women, emperors ruled all. But once a year, in the depths of winter, Rome turned itself upside down. The world flipped, order dissolved, and chaos reigned. This was Saturnalia, a festival in honor of Saturn, god of plenty, time, and disorder. The festival began on December 17th and stretched for days. At first glance, Saturnalia seemed joyful, feasting, gift-giving, games, and laughter. But beneath the cheer was something darker, something uncanny. For in Saturnalia, the world was turned inside out. Slaves were freed from their duties, allowed to speak freely, even mock their masters. They sat at the tables, while the masters served them. In some houses, slaves donned their masters' clothes, while the masters wore the simple caps of freedmen. It was a world without rules, and that made it frightening. Gambling, normally forbidden, was not only allowed, but celebrated. Drunkenness spilled into the streets, songs filled the night, and masks concealed identities. Hidden beneath those masks, words that could never be spoken aloud in ordinary days were shouted into the winter air. The most unsettling part of Saturnalia was the Saturnalian king. In many celebrations, a mock ruler was chosen, sometimes a slave, sometimes the least worthy member of the household. For the duration of the festival, he gave absurd orders: sing naked in the streets, dance on the tables, pour wine until the cups overflow, and all obeyed. But this mock king carried a shadow. For in earlier times, according to some sources, the chosen figure was not just a parody. At the festival's end, he might be sacrificed, his body given to Saturn as the price of chaos. Whether this was fact or rumor, the idea haunted the celebration. Even in later centuries, the role of the Saturnalian king carried the chill of death, a reminder that disorder always demanded a cost. Imagine the streets of Rome, torches burning in the winter night, laughter and screams mingling, dice clattering across tables, slaves shouting at their masters, masks grinning from every shadow. It was freedom, yes, but also frenzy. the thin line between joy and violence. The poet Catullus called Saturnalia the best of days, but the philosopher Seneca warned of its danger, of how quickly men forgot restraint when the world turned upside down. Saturnalia lingered in memory long after Rome's fall. Some of its customs, gift-giving, candles, evergreen decorations echo in our winter festivals even today. Yet the heart of Saturnalia remains unsettling, a ritual of inversion where society surrendered itself to chaos, and in that chaos, brushed against the darker edge of human nature. Across the windswept plains of Europe and the steppes of Eurasia, warriors once carried with them a terrifying symbol of power: the severed heads of their enemies. For the Celts of Western Europe and the Scythians of the steppe, the head was not merely a grisly trophy. It was sacred, imbued with the very soul of the vanquished. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus wrote with horror about the Celts. After battle, they would cut off the heads of their fallen foes and hang them from the necks of their horses. At home, they would nail these heads above their doors, letting them rot in plain view, a constant reminder of their strength and their victory. The Celts believed the head was the seat of the soul. Capture it, and you captured the essence of your enemy. Archaeological evidence supports the stories. At Rocapertus and Entremont in southern France, archaeologists uncovered stone niches filled with human skulls, carefully arranged. The skulls were not discarded remains but displayed relics, part of a sacred ritual space. Warriors may have spoken to these heads, sought counsel, or believed they held supernatural protection for the community. The Scythians, nomadic horsemen of the steppe, were no less chilling. According to Herodotus, they took the scalps of their enemies, using them as trophies and stitching them into cloaks. But the most shocking ritual was what they did with skulls. They fashioned them into drinking cups, stripped of flesh, polished, and sometimes bound in gold. These skulls were used in feasts to honor victory. To raise such a cup was to humiliate the dead enemy eternally, and to drink in their power. Imagine the scene: a Celtic warrior returning home, a horse dripping with blood, a human head dangling from the saddle. Children point, wives look on with pride or dread, elders nod approvingly. Or a Scythian chieftain, seated in a felt tent lit by flickering oil lamps, lifting a gilded skull cup high, wine sloshing inside, while his men chant songs of conquest. To us it seems barbaric, but to these cultures it was a way of binding the world of the living and the dead. The enemy was not gone, he was present, his essence captured and repurposed. His skull became a symbol of triumph, a vessel of protection, or a reminder that the gods favored the strong. Roman writers, ever eager to paint the Celts and Scythians as savage, may have exaggerated some details. Yet the bones speak for themselves. Excavations across Gaul, the Balkans, and the Black Sea confirm that headhunting was real, its echoes etched into temples and burial mounds. In a world where war was constant, where tribes fought endlessly for land and honor, the head was more than a trophy. It was a ritual object, a bridge between life, death, and the supernatural. And in the silent sockets of those skulls, warriors believed. The power of the enemy still stared back, conquered, but never forgotten. High above the Valley of Mexico, the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan shimmered like a jewel on the lake. Its great causeways stretched like arms across the water, leading to a city alive with markets, palaces, and towering temples. But at the heart of this empire, at the top of the massive Templo Mayor, unfolded a ritual so shocking that even hardened Spanish conquistadors recoiled in horror: human sacrifice. For the Aztecs, sacrifice was not cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was cosmic necessity. They believed the universe was balanced on the edge of disaster, and only by feeding the gods with blood and hearts could the sun rise each morning. The greatest debt was owed to Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. Without nourishment, he would falter, and darkness would consume the world. The rituals reached their terrifying peak during the festival of Tlacaxipewilistli, the flaying of men. Captives taken in battle were paraded through the streets, painted in sacred colors, and forced to climb the steep steps of the pyramid. Priests, clad in black robes and obsidian masks, awaited them at the summit. There, before the blazing sun and the eyes of thousands, the victim was laid across a sacrificial stone. With a knife of sharpened obsidian, the priest would slice open the chest in a single practiced stroke. A gush of blood would follow as he reached in and tore out the still-beating heart, raising it skyward as an offering to the gods. Drums thundered, conch shells wailed, and the crowd roared in a frenzy of devotion and fear. The body, now lifeless, was hurled down the temple steps, bouncing and rolling until it struck the courtyard below. Some victims' skins were flayed and worn by young warriors, symbolizing renewal and the shedding of old life. Others were decapitated, their skulls mounted on the grisly Tompantli, the skull rack, so that their empty eyes could gaze forever across the sacred precinct. The scale of these rituals remains one of the most chilling aspects. Spanish chroniclers claimed that during the dedication of the Templo Mayor in 1487, as many as 20,000 prisoners were sacrificed in just 4 days. While modern historians debate the exact number, there is no doubt the sacrifices were massive, deliberate spectacles designed to awe both subjects and enemies. To witness such an event was to be reminded of the Aztec Empire's absolute power and of one's own fragile mortality. And yet, within Aztec culture, these sacrifices were not acts of cruelty, but acts of balance. To die upon the temple was to join the sun in his eternal struggle against darkness. Captives selected for sacrifice were not seen as mere victims, but as offerings, honored in song and ritual before their final moment. In their worldview, the spilling of blood was not an end, but a continuation, a way of feeding the cycle of life and ensuring the survival of all. Still, when Hernán Cortés and his men first beheld the blood-stained temples and racks of skulls, they were horrified. To European eyes, this was barbarism beyond comprehension, but to the Aztecs, it was the very foundation of cosmic order. Imagine the sound of those drums echoing across the lake, the sight of flames flickering against temple walls splattered with crimson, the crowd chanting as one heart after another was torn from living chests. It was both theater and theology, terror and transcendence. The Aztec Empire may have fallen beneath Spanish steel and disease, but the memory of their sacrifices endures. Today, the ruins of the Templo Mayor still rise in Mexico City, and archaeologists continue to uncover skull racks and altars stained with the past. These remains whisper the same chilling truth. For the Aztecs, blood was the price of the sun, and sacrifice was the heartbeat of the world. Far from the bloody altars of the Aztecs, across the vast Pacific Ocean, another kind of ritual unfolded, one not of human sacrifice, but of endurance, faith, and the mysterious power of the human spirit. This was the ritual of firewalking, practiced for centuries across the islands of Polynesia, from Fiji to Tahiti, Hawaii to Samoa. Imagine a night on a tropical island. The air is heavy with the scent of salt and flowers. Villagers gather in a great circle, their faces painted with ash, their chants rising like the roar of the surf. At the center lies a pit filled with glowing stones, heated by a raging fire until they radiate a blinding orange light. The heat is so intense that the air itself seems to shimmer. Into this furnace step the chosen few, priests, chiefs, or sometimes entire groups of men and women, bare feet pressing against rock that should scorch them to the bone. And yet, they walk unharmed. Slowly, steadily, their footsteps leaving no blister, no mark of pain. The Polynesians believed this was no trick. It was mana, spiritual power, that allowed them to endure. Mana flowed from the gods, from the ancestors, from the earth itself. To walk upon fire was to prove oneself in harmony with this force, to demonstrate purity of spirit and strength of heart. Those who succeeded were blessed with prestige and respect. Those who faltered risked not only burns but the shame of spiritual weakness. But these rituals were more than personal trials. They were communal events, woven deeply into the fabric of island society. In Fiji, fire walking was linked to tales of warriors who received the gift of fire resistance from a serpent god. In Hawaii, it honored Pele, the fierce goddess of volcanoes, whose lava flows shaped and destroyed in equal measure. To walk across fire was to walk across the body of a deity herself, daring yet respectful. The psychological power of the ritual cannot be overstated. Drums pounded in rhythm with the walkers' hearts. The crowd's chants rose and fell like waves, infusing participants with courage. The moment their bare souls touched the stones, they became part of something greater, a performance for gods and humans alike, a visible reminder of the unseen powers that bound them together. Even in modern times, fire walking has not vanished. Anthropologists and scientists have studied the ritual, marveling at how cultural belief, focus, and preparation can override instinct and pain. Some explain it through physics, the thin layer of ash, the speed of movement, the conductivity of heat. But for those who practice it, such explanations miss the essence. Fire walking is not about tricks of science. It is about the surrender of fear and the triumph of spirit. Picture it, the pit glowing in the dark, sparks rising into a starlit sky. Bare feet step onto living flame, and yet no scream, no cry of agony breaks the night. Only song, only chanting, only the steady walk of those who trust that the gods and ancestors walk beside them. For the Aztecs, ritual demanded blood. For the Polynesians, it demanded courage. And in both, the message was the same. The line between life and death, pain and transcendence, is thinner than we think, and only ritual can reveal who dares to cross it. Long before the grandeur of the Great Wall or the glory of the Forbidden City, China's earliest dynasties sought guidance in a way that feels both strange and eerie today. In the late Shang dynasty, over 3,000 years ago, kings and priests turned not to temples or blood sacrifice, but to the bones of animals and the shells of turtles burned, cracked, and read like cosmic messages. These were the oracle bones, and they were the bridge between man and the divine. Imagine the court of a Shang king. The ruler, draped in silk and jade, sits upon a throne, his eyes shadowed by the flickering light of bronze lamps. Before him, diviners hold the flat shoulder blade of an ox, or the polished underside of a turtle's shell. Onto these surfaces they carve inscriptions, the king's deepest questions. Will we win the coming battle? Will the harvest be plentiful? Will the queen bear a son? The bones are then placed into the fire. As they heat, sharp cracks spider across the surface. Priests lean close, their faces grave, interpreting the patterns. To them, these were not random lines, but the very voices of the ancestors answering from beyond death. Every crack was a word, every fissure a prophecy. What makes this ritual so chilling is its obsessive detail. The bones often carry inscriptions, noting the date, the diviner, the question, and the outcome. Thousands have been unearthed, recording everything from eclipses to plagues, wars to royal births. The Shang kings lived in a world where nothing was decided without consulting the cracks in bone, but the ritual did not end with the reading. Often, blood was smeared across the bones, or offerings made to confirm the ancestors' power. And if the prophecy was grim, if the cracks warned of famine or invasion, then harsher rituals followed, sacrifices of animals, sometimes even humans, to appease the restless spirits. To modernize, the oracle bones are eerie, not only for their supernatural purpose, but for their legacy. These carvings are the earliest known form of Chinese writing, the ancestors of the characters still used today. What began as questions to the dead became the foundation of one of the world's most enduring civilizations. Close your eyes and imagine the sound, the hiss of bone as it cracks in the fire, the low murmurs of priests deciphering fate, the king's breath caught between hope and dread. In those fractures lay the destiny of kingdoms. In the curling smoke of burning shells, the line between the living and the dead was crossed. Even now, archaeologists, unearthing oracle bones, describe an almost haunted feeling, holding in their hands the very questions, fears, and hopes of people who lived 3 millennia ago. Questions about life and death, war and love, that echo across time, from the blood-soaked temples of the Aztecs to the fire pits of Polynesia, from the chilling child sacrifices of Carthage to the cracked bones of ancient China. One truth binds these rituals together. Humanity has always reached beyond the visible world, for comfort, for power, for meaning in the face of mortality. And sometimes, what they reached for demanded a price. Thank you for walking with us through the shadows of history. This has been Midnight History. If you're listening late at night, let these echoes of the past carry you into dreams. And remember, the line between ritual and nightmare is thinner than we think.